Last week when I stepped out my front door, I saw flashing lights and police cars on the next block. My neighbor lady, she came out holding her infant in her arms with her 3-year-old, and she said, "There's been a shooting." I felt shock and fear. I'm going to Nazareth tomorrow. Is my wife going to be okay while I'm away? As a child, I grew up on a farm, and our nearest neighbors were a mile away. During the summer, the only people I saw were my brothers and people at church on Sunday. Violence was the furthest thing from my mind or experience, but I was taught to turn the other cheek if struck and to love my enemies. So, in the case of the shooting, what could it possibly mean to turn the other cheek? Answers to this and other questions are what brought me here to Nazareth. I'm on my way to meet Dr. Nachli, a cardiologist and former hospital medical director. He's a member of the Mary's Well Greek Orthodox Church and a man deeply committed to his faith. I'm also told he's an amazing storyteller, and I can hardly wait to see what I'll learn from him.
I was a very small child. I was brought by my grandfather to the church every Sunday, and he would look after me in the church, teaching me how to pray and to worship. And then a very short time after that, my grandfather was very sick, and he was bedridden, and he was unable to go anymore to the church. So he asked one of the elders of the church, a close friend, to look after me in church. So this old man brought me. He was sitting, very strict. He was a school headmaster. He was very strict. He would tell me, "Nachli, you stand here. In the church, you never sit down." By the way, I never sat until today. I'm 73 years, always worshiping, standing. When you worship, you stand, you don't sit. One day, the cantor of the church saw me, and he, after the prayers, he came to me and said, "Would you like to sing?" I was 6, 7 years old or so. I can't remember the exact date. So I went and asked him, "Would you mind that I would stand with the cantor?" He said, "As long as I see you, it's okay." I brought you here to a reconstruction of a farm from the 1st century in order to tell you a story of a family and the relationships in between this family. It's a story about a father and 2 sons. See? And you can see from this story the conflicts building in the relationships between all the 3. Stories are a very influential tool of communicating very complex and complicated ideas. And this is what it's all about. That's why I had to bring you to a farm from the 1st century, in order to be able to understand and see the meanings and the very deep and complicated meanings of the message of the story. One day, the younger brother comes to his father and he asks him, "Give me my share of inheritance." From the very beginning, the story comes very tense. How could a son, the younger brother, be so rude to come and ask for his share of inheritance? Inheritance usually ask when the father is dead. The father grants him what he asked for. He divided his property and he gave the share of the youngest brother. Life in the first century was based on community life. When you leave your community, you are cut off. He went to a faraway country, which means to exile, and he spent all his money. He squandered all what he had. And then famine struck, and he was in bad need. So he goes and attaches himself to another farmer who would send him to look after his pigs. The lowest possible, the most filthy work. And he thinks of the slaves at his father's house who were much happier and living in a much better condition than where he was. So he walks, and while he was still far away, his father saw him in this filthy condition, and he ran to him and fell on his neck and kissed him on the neck. Here I need to stop to explain some of the cultural meaning of all this. When people meet, if they are equal, they would kiss on the cheek, each other on the cheek. This is the habit today. If they are of a different social status, the lower status would kiss the neck, the shoulder, or the hand. If he is a slave, he would kneel and kiss the feet. And here it tells us that the father ran away and he went to the son and he fell on his neck, which means that he humiliated himself so much. He was filled with compassion and he ran and fell on the neck of his son. And he asks the servants who were probably running after him, bring the best robe and put on him. Bring the ring and put on his finger, and give him sandals to wear for his feet. Every one of these symbols, every one of these acts, has a meaning, a cultural meaning. The robe means, putting the robe means accepting him back, giving him, accepting him back to the family. Okay? Then, putting a ring means giving him the authority that he had before to sign, to do everything. So he is giving him back all the authority he had before he left the home. And putting sandals on his feet, meaning that he is not a slave anymore, because slaves would go barefoot. And then the father turns to his servants and said, slaughter the fatted calf and let us celebrate all together. Meaning, to slaughter a calf, it means that we need to reconcile, to eat and sit together, to reconcile his son to all the village. Invite all the people of the village to come together. The elder brother was in the fields when all this happened. He comes back from the fields, so he was angry and did not want to enter. So the father goes out to him. Again, the father humiliates himself. And he goes out to him. And the elder brother tells his father, I am serving you all my life. I never disobeyed any one of your order. One might think that he was asking for justice. And justice in his eyes is to punish people for the wrongdoings that they have done.
And in modern day Nazareth, are there still problems with inheritance, and is this relevant?
It's relevant not only in Nazareth. It's relevant all over the world because this is a story of a human relationship. When we see problems of inheritance, fighting in between the brothers, people asking for justice, the justice with compassion is full of mercy. Justice without compassion becomes revenge. Justice with compassion brings peace and coherence together. By the way, this story was told by Jesus 2,000 years ago. Jesus of Nazareth.
He's the master storyteller.
Yeah.
I was struck last night with how the 2,000-year-old story of the prodigal son is still relevant for the people living here in the Galilee region of Israel. I'm delighted to be in the home of Anis and Noel Barhoum. When I arrived here, they overwhelmed me with their hospitality, giving me hugs, food, and coffee. They've agreed to share their story of a family conflict. So it's great to be here in your home.
You're most welcome.
And I'm just really eager to hear about your story.
أهلاً وسهلاً. اسمي أنيس.
My name is Anis Barhoum. I married Noel in 1973, and I live in a city called Shafamar.
والمظبوط.
And I lived in a house in the same building as my brothers, and in front of it was a piece of land that I inherited from my father to build my house on it. And after a period of time of living in that building, I started thinking I want to build my own house on this piece of land, and I was content with this small piece of land that I received from my father. So I started building my house on this piece of land, but my brother, who's also my neighbor, loved this land, and he told me he wanted it and I cannot build my house on it, and he took it from me. And honestly, I was very upset, I was very angry, and I also had a lot of bitterness inside of me.
فأنا بديت
So I turned to alcohol because I thought alcohol would help me forget all these problems.
لأنه هذا إشي كمان.
But now I realize alcohol did not help me forget these problems. Instead, it only made them bigger and bigger and bigger.
I'm curious, Noel, how did you experience that conflict?
I come from a refugee family from 1948. They're originally from Bisan, Beit Shan.
من بيسان.
I know what it feels like to lose your house, to lose your land. They've lost everything they had. They've lost their business as well.
خسروا البزنس تبعهم كمان في البلاد هناك.
But they've chosen not to be the victim. And when this conflict rose, in the beginning, it's true, I felt bitterness.
مرارة.
We left our house there because there were too many family conflicts. And every single time, we put a stone down and we worked with our hands because we didn't have money to pay someone to do the job for us. Every time we did something simple, a problem rose with his brother. And we felt like God was telling us to leave this place. I used to look at my husband and I'd feel saddened that he was filled with bitterness and anger. He used to wake up at night screaming because he was dreaming that he was fighting with his brother in a vicious way. So I increased my prayers specifically for this topic. And I asked God to help me not to be caught up in this situation. I'm not a victim. I know that God had chosen a place for me. And in His timing, He answered my prayers, just as it is written, "Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His love, His mercy endures forever." He strengthened us, and He gave us the courage to work day and night and to buy a new piece of land in a miraculous way.
بصورة عجائبية
and to build our house, our home on it. But the Lord said,
بيتنا، لكن الرب قال لنا
the first thing that you need to do is to forgive.
لازم تتسامح.
Repent from the bitterness that you had in your hearts and ask for forgiveness from your family.
The problem here, what my wife is talking about, is it's not simple to say, let's just leave this land because I received a word from the Lord and let's go somewhere else. To me, this made me even angrier. How do I leave this land that my father gave me? This is where I'm supposed to build my house, just like my brother built his house here. And when my wife talks about me waking up at night yelling, it's because I had boiling anger inside. And I started hating my family. But when we moved to the house we built on this new piece of land, we thought, just as my wife said, we need to forgive. And when we forgave, we were able to enter this house and have dinner with the whole family and bring this peace back to everyone. With my mother, with my brother and his children. And there was great joy that the Lord gave us. And what added joy to our life is when we met with my family. We began to forget, little by little, the old house that we started building, and we left that house for 17 years. Just walls, no roof. And everyone asked us, Anis, Nawal, why did you leave that house? I said, I want to leave this house to my brother and his family. Truly, I thank the Lord for His plan, because His plan was clear to us. But honestly, it was a story filled with hurt, and only God can heal these wounds.
Amen.
And I am sure that the one who healed our wounds is only Christ, and we should trust in Him and know that He is the compassionate and merciful Father to this very day.
Amen.
When I met with Anis and Noel, I knew they had agreed to share about a family conflict. I did not anticipate the parallels with the prodigal son story as told by Dr. Nachli. Today, I'm here in Bethlehem with Zogby, the founder of WIAM, a community-based organization devoted to conflict transformation and peace building. I understand that his passion for nonviolence runs deep. What does WIAM mean?
WIAM means cordial relationship, agape, harmony, unconditional love.
Could you tell me something about the nature of the conflict that you're dealing with and how you approach it and what impact it has on this community?
You talk about a place full of conflict. There is no single moment that you wouldn't witness some difficulties, some challenges, some problems. And you name the conflicts that we, from small type of conflict to a bigger type of conflict. And of course, we are living in a protracted conflicting area, full of history, full of layers. Some of them are difficult to deal with, especially those related to rape or wanton killing. And, you talk about different types based on economical reasons, social reasons, theft, child delinquency, conflict between landlord and tenant, between employer, employee, you name it, and never be a dull moment. The impact is very drastic. If we talk about the larger conflict, we have lots of traumas. There are 4 types of traumas. The collective trauma of 1948, where the Palestinians were kicked out from at least 620 villages, 750,000 refugees. And this collective trauma is seen in the refugee camps spread all over the Middle East, at least 62 refugee camps in West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. And you can see it in the displacement of many people here and there, and the unhealthy conditions that they live, And we are living in a pressure cooker situation as a result of 1948, what we call a Nakba. We don't want them to be pro-Palestinian, but we want them to be pro-justice, because justice for all. Not justice that I learned when I was a kid, just us. No, it is justice for all, and to help us celebrate life. The second type of trauma that we are exposed, the intergenerational trauma, you know? I remember my mother, God bless her, our father, telling us about the time during the Ottoman occupation. I call it Ottoman occupation because any foreign occupation, any foreign presence is occupation, regardless to its religion, regardless to its nationality, like the Crusaders, like the British Mandate, and so on. So tell me stories about the time when Turkey, Ottoman Empire was here, how people were in bad shape. And of course, this I will tell my kids about it too. Then the third type of trauma is family trauma. If a house was demolished for some family, if they were displaced as it is now happening, you know, it is a family group, small group trauma. And the fourth one, individual trauma. And you can see it, sleepwalk, nightmares, drinking too many coffee and tea, smoking a lot of cigarettes, trembling their hands, unhealthy conditions, stress-related sicknesses. We are still living under the trauma, and the Nakba didn't stop. It has been happening since 1948. So the impact is very big, drastically impacting our lives, personal life, family life, and I have a trauma myself when the Israeli occupation does not allow my wife to live with me since 1990. She is a tourist in my home. She is a visitor, and you have more right coming here to visit than my wife, who we have been married since 1990. She cannot go to Jerusalem. She cannot drive a yellow license car. She cannot go anywhere, and we love to go to Galilee. But since we are not allowed to go to Galilee, we go to our upper Galilee in our heart.
So you talked about sulha. What does it mean to practice sulha here by the wall?
Sulha is art of peacemaking, peace building in our society. Sulha means how to transform the garbage of anger, the garbage of hate into tree and flower of compassion. And it is an Arab tradition. Sulha that people talk about is very traditional, but we are not very traditional because it is sophisticated, it has its terminology, it has its issues, and especially when you are not able to balance the imbalance. And sometimes traditional approaches are not healthy. What we use is synergy. The idea is how to transform the conflict, how to transform people's life, how to create healthy and amicable relationship. That's why I'm not really very traditional in this approach, but at the same time, there is a lot of power using such a tradition that we have inherited throughout ages from our ancestors long ago, and we still use it. We use probably the same technique. You know, when you come and there is a customary law, you know, how are you, how things go, and you begin with a story. And the stories are didactic, you know, like the parables of Jesus. How many times Jesus used the parables? So we are learning and walking in his shoes to dealing with mediation. And this is really where we are and what we do in sulha and mediation.
Here I am in Manger Square, in front of the Church of the Nativity, where Jesus was born. What an amazing privilege it was to interview Zogby. Felt like it was a master class on conflict transformation. I asked him privately, so where do you find Christ? in your daily life? And he said it was in suffering. He said he's not Roman Catholic, but the Stations of the Cross are tremendously meaningful to him. He feels like they represent the same kind of suffering that he and his people go through. And he said the most encouraging one is the 13th one, where the empty tomb reveals liberation. And he hopes that that's also their liberation. I came to Nazareth with questions about nonviolence. I learned about forgiveness, reconciliation, and justice. I'm leaving with a lot to think about.